Hey guys, welcome back to Maria Makes It. It's Maria here. So today I want to show you how to make something that has recently really lit up my life. They're fluffy, they're colorful, they're whimsical, they come in different sizes and shapes. They are Pom Poms. And they've frankly been dominating my Instagram feed. And that's for good reason, because they're so versatile, they're so fun to make, really actually quite relaxing if you sit down in front of a good Netflix show and just start trimming away. They're just something that adds a little bit of fun and texture and whimsy to any craft. And there's so many different ways you can make them. There's also just a lot of different types of textures you can add to them. Lately I've been enjoying mixing and matching color combinations and trying different patterns within the pom-poms. Here's an example of a pair of earrings I made that have this fun kind of speckled pattern going on with this mustard and kind of fuchsia color with a nice little accent bead on the top. And they make for just a really fun accessory. Once you start making pom-poms, you may find that you want to start making tassels too, which I'll definitely show you guys in another video. But yeah, you can get together some jewelry making materials too, because that's a great way to start to make pom-poms. In this case, I've used like a stainless steel earring hook, these little chains that you can buy. They're very fine and thin in texture and shape. I'd recommend them more streamlined the better for this type of craft. Also just like a little colorful bead accents and some eye hooks and some pliers just to close up your work here. So yeah, I've enjoyed making different sizes. You can see the scales vary greatly. You can use them to attach at the end of pillows. You can make rugs out of pom-poms. You can attach them to the end of your dresses or shirts. You can make necklaces. You can make hair accessories. Like honestly, you can make anything. This is a great project to do with kids too. It's something that creates a nice opportunity to bond. It helps to build great motor skills too. I prefer personally to not use the awesome fancy little tools they have out there to make pom-poms that are literally designed so that every time you make a pom-pom, the diameters are consistent. I like a little flair to mine, like a little bit of, I don't know, imperfection. I think it adds more to the texture and the whimsy of it. I don't really want them to look like they were made by a machine. So I personally enjoy the opportunity to continue to refine my motor skills. So I do things a little more the old-fashioned way, which is kind of what I'll be showing you today. So without further ado, let's dive into what you're gonna need to make these fun little guys.
Okay, so you're gonna need some yarn. You can use any thickness you like. What I'll be showing today will be a medium thickness. You're gonna need some scissors, preferably like sewing scissors so they're smaller and easy to work with. If it's children, make sure it's safety scissors. You're just gonna need your hands, maybe a good show on Netflix, pet brush, the ones with the really spiky little metal things for undercoats, and some sort of small trash bin. I'm gonna be using a bowl for the cuttings, and of course some imagination. So here I'm gonna show you, I've got a couple different kinds of yarn here, pink and mustard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 fingers and I'm going to start to loop the yarn around 2 fingers. And I'm going to do this approximately 60 or 70 times. I kind of just have gotten used to the right thickness, like what I can gauge it as I spool the yarn around my fingers. So yeah, I'm gonna go and just make sure I get to that point. And now I'm gonna snip it off because I feel like it's at a good thickness. Next, I'm gonna take off a little segment of yarn, and this is what I'm gonna use to tie in the middle of this little spool that I made. It's gonna be like a little bow tie. So I'm gonna just very carefully wiggle this off my fingers just to make sure I'm not pulling anything out of place, just kind of inch it off. All right, so now we're gonna take this little yarn segment that I cut off, and you can see me pinching in the middle like a little mini baby bow tie. Okay, so now I'm just gonna kind of secure one side with my hands and awkwardly kind of throw this little segment over it and get ready to tie it in some knots. I'm just gonna start off with kind of your standard little knot just to get it nice and tight. So I'm just gonna loop it under. And I'm just gonna pull it through. Make sure it's nicely centered in the middle. Pull it really nice and tight as you possibly can. And sometimes it moves a little, so just scrunch it in the right direction. Now I'm gonna go ahead and tie one more knot to secure it, and then after that, I'm gonna tie a square knot or two. And if you don't remember that Girl Scout rhyme, it's right over left, and then left over right. That's what makes a square knot tight. And this will help to keep it nice and locked in. Great. As you can see, it's kind of pulled itself into a circle. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the extra dangles. And there's our little package. So now we're going to go ahead and cut the loops open. So you can see me kind of just wiggling my scissors in there. You can kind of see what type of scissors I'm using. It's a pair that I got from the dollar store, of course. But they're the perfect size, and you can see how it allows me to work on a pretty small pom-pom and get into those loops easily and cut them. You wouldn't have this easy of a time if you were using some like standard Fiskar scissors or like, you know, scissors that you use to cut fabric. And so now we're all unlooped, and you can see it looks kind of like a little sloppy mess. But that's okay, because we're gonna do some beautification here. So just make sure you've cut all the loops, because sometimes it gets hard to see as it gets fluffier. And now I'm just kind of fluffing it out to get an idea of the diameter. Now this is like a nice medium small size pom-pom. You can kind of get an idea because of the size of my thumb next to it. So now I've got my little pink bucket, which in hindsight was probably a bad idea because I have a pink pom-pom and a peach hand, but just bear with me here. Just trimming up the sides, trying to get the diameter to look really nice and circular and even. Now I'm just doing it by eye here, but honestly, there's probably 1,001 ways to get your pom-pom looking great. I'm using a Kyolic bottle because that's what I had, and it was the perfect diameter for this sized pom-pom. I've often seen people use cardboard. They cut into little circle templates and they make a little sandwich. So they put one cutout on the top, one cutout on the bottom, and push the pom-pom very tightly squished between it and kind of cut whatever sticks out. I'm doing something similar here, but just in a very resourceful way. As you can see, it's really starting to take shape. You know, it's just having another object over it for contrast really helps you to see what needs to be cut off. And so now I periodically fluff it out in different directions, and you can see it's a little lopsided. So I'm just gonna keep trimming this baby up. But you can see a pom-pom is being forged here. So now I'm feeling pretty content with this little fluff. This is a really nice kind of shiny yarn. I cannot remember what the package says as far as what it's made of. I know it's some sort of synthetic, but it's got a very pleasant shine to it, and you'll see when we fluff it out in the next couple steps how pretty it looks. By the way, an ordinary spool of yarn costs almost about $3 just for your basic, average, everyday acrylic yarn. And look at that. Each pom-pom has its own little individual character. Not one is alike. And that's kind of why I love cutting it this way. I know I could get a very fancy pom-pom cutter, but there's just something so satisfying about sculpting the pom-pom into shape. And there it is. Of course, just make any little adjustments as you see fit. And this is just a little extra added bonus here. I like to sometimes fluff out my pom-poms. With this particular yarn, it looks really gorgeous when it's fluffed out. This is the cat brush I was telling you about. It's got those very fine metal prickly things. And as you can see, I'm just kind of rubbing the pom-pom and alternating with like a brushing motion. And this will make the pom-pom so fluff-tastic. Look at that. Now there is going to be little hairs that will stick out, just really fine fibers. Just go ahead and trim those off after you brush your pom-pom. And now here's the finished work of art. Here's another method I kind of discovered when I was trying to figure out cool ways to make them. Just take 2 knitting needles and you're going to cut off a little segment of yarn. You're going to feed that through in between the 2 needles. Now this is just a cut off little segment that you're going to use to tie the pom-pom later on. We're going to put this on first and you'll see why in a couple minutes. Next, we're going to just spool the yarn over and over onto these knitting needles until we get the desired thickness. This is going to be a rather tiny pom-pom, and it's just adorable. These little tiny ones are so cute. You can see I have a nice little bundle going here. It's getting pretty thick. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the excess. And now this is the handy part. We're going to take one side there that we stuck between the needles of this little segment and take the other side and feed it through the front of the needles, as you can see. There it goes through the front, and now you can see that we have a piece of yarn on either side, which we're going to handily tie into that little bow tie shape right now. And there we go. And this gives you a little more stability. And then after, you just slide it off and tie the knots and do the same thing you did before. So here we have some mega deluxe sized pom-poms. As you can see, they have a cool marbled pattern of different colors in them. These are my absolute favorite to make, and I'm going to show you a scaled up version of how to make these with, again, just your hands and some yarn and scissors. So I'm going to use these 3 colors, this teal, mustard, and pink color. I'm just trying to show you the yarn I'm using. They're all that Super Saver brand. I believe I picked these up at Walmart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with one color at a time. I'm going to start with this mustard yellow color, and to get the desired diameter of these giant pom-poms, I'm actually just going to spool it right around the center of my palm. And you're just going to spool maybe 20 to 30 strokes of each color. You're going to alternate. So first I'm just going to put this one on there. And then now I'm going to do the next color, which is pink. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. And you can mix it up. You can do more of one color, less of another. This is the fun part, experimenting with patterns and textures. And then I'm just going to lay on my last color, teal. And this color I'm actually going to generously apply. I'm going to use this as like kind of my base color. So, as you can see, I got a nice hefty amount on my palm. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut off a segment to make the bow tie shape with this mass on my hand. Just carefully slide it off just like you do with the smaller ones. This is a lot easier to work with because it's so massive, so it's not as awkward to get that little string on. But the same deal. So first we're going to do the like over under little thing just to secure it. Right in the middle, position it properly, pull it really nice and tight. And there you can see the circle shape kind of forming. And again, I'm just square knotting this up, and there we go. It's kind of like a mystery package. Like, what's gonna happen when we cut into it? It's definitely like the fun part. It's like the reveal, so you could see like what pattern lies beneath. And I've just sped this up because we've seen this before. And look at those colors coming through. How fun is that? It's like a little color fiesta in there. And as you can see, it's kind of a big ratty mess. And we're gonna just go ahead and start cutting it down, making sure all the loops are gone, starting off by cutting out all the little extra long ones that are sticking out and really obvious. And then we'll slowly work our way in towards the middle, cutting off just enough to make sure that it's nice and even. And now what makes these extra special is that I actually start brushing them out pretty much right away. As soon as I get the loops cut, I go through this kind of satisfying process of brushing out all the yarn. And as you can see, the yarn becomes very fur-like or hair-like, which is awesome. It adds an extra element of whimsy to these little creations and also just makes them really, really fluffy and dense. So when you're brushing them out, you're gonna have to like open up the layers, make sure you're really getting in there, flip it around different ways, and also make sure to do a patting motion and a brushing motion. That kind of helps to lift and open up the fibers that have been braided together to make the yarn. Now sometimes you find little loops that snuck by you during the process of cutting. Be sure to clean out your brush every so often so that you have the most length of the little spines on this brush available, because as it collects fur, it won't be as sharp. So just clean it off when you see it starting to fill up. Fun side note, don't toss the fluff. Keep it for stuffing things like stuffed animals, doll pillows, making fabric dolls, just various types of things you would buy the fill from, like that white fill you see at the store, the craft store. You can save this and make things with it. You can also use the fluff as fur, so you can make little things with your kids, like hair on little characters. Anyway, just let your imagination run wild. You can see it's kind of a scruffy Pom Pom at this point, but this is just what it looks like after the initial brushing. So now we're going to go ahead and start to cut around just like we did with the smaller ones. And you're gonna have to go back in and continue to brush as you work the pom-pom, because you're gonna start to like see little layers kind of come up. And that, honestly, I feel like this is why it's so meditative to make pom-poms, because like you're just so focused and it's very attention to detail. I mean, if you really want to amp up the pom-pom process, like the meditation aspect, you can like listen to ASMR or like watch Netflix or listen to some meditation music, because honestly, I feel like it would go well together. The more you do this, the more skill you're gonna have in being able to cut this by eye. You just get more confident over time. As you can see, I'm kind of stretching and pulling it out just to make sure I get it nice and flat when I'm cutting it, so that we get nice clean edges, and so I can also have a better idea of what's sticking out. Other ways you can make pom-poms are using 2 toilet paper rolls, kind of similar to that knitting needle method. You can also buy a clover pom-pom cutter. That's like kind of the easiest way, I would say, if you want to just spend a little. They sell them online or to craft stores. You can also use a fork to make smaller pom-poms, because you can imagine the teeth on the fork make it easy to spool the string on, and also to add that little securing string in the middle. But this is just the way I like to make them. I'm gonna do a video in the future, probably going into more detail about things you can do with these, and also just some more methods and tips and tricks. But this is just my little introductory pom-pom video. You can see this is getting really nice and fluffy now, and it's really cool to see how it's marbled, and that is dependent on what order you put the color in, and also it depends on how much of each you put on. And this is it, guys, a nice fluffy pom-pom. Thanks so much for watching. It was super fun teaching you guys how to make pom-poms today, and I really hope you'll give it a try. Also, be sure to check out my Instagram, Maria_makes_it, to see what other crafts I'm up to. Also, I have an Etsy store, Maria Makes It Shop, where I'm constantly posting new quirky merch. See you next time.